Namaskar. Welcome to this session. We are considering Pratyahara, the fifth aspect of Ashtanga Yoga. We know that for spiritual pursuit, we need to be departing from stark worldliness, stark mundanity. It is not true that for Paramartha and for spiritual process, you have to be thwarting mundanity, thwarting worldliness, thwarting vaishayikata. But there must be some kind of refrainment, although not complete, to some extent. So we must, to some extent, depart from mundanity and worldliness to embrace spirituality or Paramartha. At the same time, we have to understand it is not that we have to turn our back absolutely, completely. This is what the Parampara tells us, the long Parampara of Bhagavatas, Bhagavata Dharma, or Parampara that the devotees have given. The devotees have often mentioned about blend of samsara and paramartha, prapancha and paramartha. So there must be discrete kind of amalgamation of the two in a suitable proportion. This proportion should be in favor of paramartha and adhyatma and spirituality, and not in favor of bhogartha, not in favor of mundanity, not in favor of prapancha. So prapancha is not banished, worldliness is not banished. So this is what we have to understand. Now, the Pratyahara has invariably a very close relationship with Jnanendriyas. It is beyond doubt. Although in the previous sessions we were given the impression that Pratyahara is of the Indriyas, and the Indriyas are Jnanendriyas, Karmendriyas, Manasendriyas, Antarendriyas, Sharirendriyas. But the magic of Jnanendriyas is that they tell us about Jnanavishayas, and they also therefore divulge us Bhogavishayas, because our worldly jnana, empirical jnana, is of the nature of Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa Gandha, and the Bhogavishayas are also Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. This is the arrangement of Maya. And why Paramartha is dreaded of Maya is because of this. Because our all knowledge, empirical knowledge, will always pertain to Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. Empirical knowledge, sensory knowledge will always pertain to Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. All knowledge is coming through our senses, will be Shabdatmaka, Sparshatmaka, Rupatmaka, Rasatmaka, Gandhatmaka. That is why they are called Jnanendriyas. But the same senses are vulnerable to drag us, impel us, propel us, push us into Vishaya Sevanam, because the Vishayas are also of 5 kinds, and the same 5 kinds. So the Jnanendriyas prone to become Bhogendriyas. That is the arrangement of Maya. That Jnanendriyas become Bhogendriyas, and if they become Bhogendriyas, then that means you are discouraged to be going towards Paramartha. You turn your back to Paramartha, you turn your back to spirituality, spiritual process. If you are under the gravity of Vishayas, Indriya Vishayas, sensory objects have very strong allurement, so much so that they wean us away from spiritual process. So for Paramartha Pravartanam, for spiritual process, spiritual pursuit, the Indriyas must be Pratyahara. The senses must be free from gravity of Bhogavishayas, which are Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa Gandha. And Yoga Shastra, Yoga gives the Tantra, the technique, gives the Sanskriti, the culture, gives the sadhana, the practices, and the manovignan, the psychology, to be getting away from the grip of Bhogavishayas, which are Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. So, to give an example here, it is like money. Money, the fiscal unit. The money, you can buy the things which can prove your doom, and you can buy the things with the same money which can be boon to you. So money can prove to be dooming us and booning us. So it is not logical to look down upon money. Money can do good things, money can do bad things. Wealth can do good things, wealth can do bad things. Wealth can prove our doom, and wealth can prove to be our boon for us. So, similarly, the Jnanendriyas can prove to be boon to us, and Jnanendriyas can prove to be doom for us. So when there is Bhoga Arthata, the Jnanendriyas wean us away from noble life and Paramarthic life. But that doesn't mean that we should smash the senses. The senses can be engaged in something noble rather than engaged in something ignoble. Senses can be engaged in something lofty, magnanimous than something that is ignoble and low. So, in Paramartha, we don't have to really wage a battle with senses to vanquish them and banish them. The senses have to be engaged in the gravity which will be boon to mankind. Like money used for good purpose, the senses can be used for good purpose, and when the senses are used for good purpose, they become Jnanendriyas. When the senses are used for bad purpose, they become Bhogendriyas. They are prone to gravitate towards both, either boonful or baneful. And engaging the senses to boonful resources is what Pratyahara is. It is not making the senses starve. So it is not anahara. If you recall the last session, it is not anahara, it is not making the senses starve, but engage the senses into something. And when you engage the senses in something where that gravity facilitates spiritual process, it is called Prati Aahara. They are not Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa Gandha, Vaisheka, but they are beyond it. So in Pratyahara, when the senses are engaged in opposite, which facilitates spiritual process and discourages mundane, worldly, prapanchik process, that is called Pratyahara. And yoga has given the technology for it. Yoga has given the tantra, the technique of it. Yoga gives the samskriti, the culture, ethos, gives the practice, sadhana, and also gives the manovignan, the psychology. And therefore, there is paramarthik pravartanam. For spiritual process, you don't have to become blind, deaf, dumb, etc. The senses must be engaged in something noble. And yoga gives the ethos, technology, process, culture, inclination, and preparedness for that. And therefore, in Paramartha, in spiritual process, Pratyahara has been hailed, and yoga also has been hailed, because yoga offers that. Yoga cultures the very senses. The senses which are prone to and vulnerable to get into the gravity of the Vishayas, worldly Vishayas, prapanchika Vishayas, they are trained to be engaged somewhere else so that they get transcendence. And when they get transcendence, the spiritual process is facilitated in big way. So Pratyahara is a technology, process, culture where the Indriya samskriti, the culture of the senses, is handled and improved and evolved. The tendencies for senses to move, to be grazing, that field is changed. Rather than the field of mire of Maya, Shabda Janjala, the Vishaya Janjala, it gives that field where senses can graze, and they will graze something sublime, something noble, something transcendent. So Indriyas are given a field to work by Pratyahara and by Yoga Samskruti. And there are ways, even it might start with Indriya Damanam, restraint of senses, Indriya Nigraha, Indriya Damanam. It is of such a kind of Indriya Damanam in Paramartha, Indriya Nigraha in Paramartha, that senses are engaged in noble. The senses are engaged in sublime. They are shown those objects which are sublime and transcendent. They also are now made to gravitate towards sublime, udatta, noble objects. And that itself is Pratyahara. So they are weaned away from their usual gravities which the Maya of Prakriti offers. And of course it needs some kind of discipline and some kind of culturing. It doesn't happen naturally. Naturally, senses are prone and they are vulnerable to be going towards these objects, and therefore they become Bhogendriyas easily. So, the point is, the Pratyahara has a culture where the senses are now given a kind of gravity so that it facilitates Paramartha. Of course, Indriya Nigraha, Indriya Damanam, Vishaya Vinivrutti, all these are aspects of Pratyahara and in a very, very rudimentary condition, raw condition, primary condition. It is not all the time that you will be whiplashing the senses, that you will be whiplashing the tendencies of the senses. It also doesn't mean that that is not at all there. It is there. But all that and only that is not Pratyahara. Pratyahara also has field beyond what we think as Indriya Nigraha, Indriya Damanam, Indriya Vishaya Vinivrutti, whiplashing the senses, whiplashing the sensory tendencies. So it is something that it is there, but all that is not Pratyahara. So also, Pratyahara is said to be reversing the Indriya Pravrutti and going for Indriya Nivrutti. This is also very primary kind of notion about Pratyahara. Indriya Pravrutti towards Vishayas is replaced by just Nivrutti. Get away from objects, go away from objects. This is also very, very primary kind of idea about Pratyahara. The Indriyas, of course, have a natural tendencies to gravitate towards their objects, and therefore that is called Vishaya Abhimukhata. Indriyas are Vishaya Abhimukha. They are not only Vishaya Abhimukha, they are Vishaya Vyasani. The Indriyas have addiction to sensory objects, and this reality should not go out of sight for us. So there is where natural pravrutti, swabhavika pravrutti, natural tendency that they go towards their objects. Not only go towards objects, they get addicted to objects. They are drawn towards the objects. They are in the gravity of their objects. They become Vishayagami. Indriyas become Vishayagami. That is, going towards their objects. Like a magnet will draw the iron particles. And as there is attraction for iron particles in magnet, the Indriyas have that magnetism, or the objects of senses have magnetism over Indriyas, and therefore they make Indriyas their slave. Vishayas, objects of senses, can make the senses their slave, and then our chitta becomes a slave of Indriyas, and ultimately we become slaves of the objects. So we should not lose the sight of the fact that there are natural tendencies of the senses to go after their objects. And therefore, to some extent, we need some whiplashing, we need some discipline, we need some coercive measures, but they are only in a very rudimentary raw condition. If one is slave of objects, and if there is a slavery of oneself towards objects, then maybe some damanam will come, Indriya Damanam, Indriya Nigraha, they do come in our ethos. Therefore, one of the Shat Sampatis is Damanam, Shama Dama. Damanam is Indriya, Indric sensory restraint. So it does have place in our ethos. But that's very primary measure, and it is not a complete measure by itself. However, it is needed. If one is addicted to objects, naturally some such measures have to be taken. But soon in yoga, one takes recourse to Indriya Samskruti Karanam, culturing the senses. So it starts getting some attachment towards something very noble, something very trans-worldly, trans-mundane. So when the senses are cultured, they will be drawn towards it. Otherwise, the senses are naturally prone to get into the gravities of their objects. That it should be understood that for Chitta Vritti Nirodha of yoga, we will have to do something that can be called as Indriya Vritti Nirodha, that is called Indriya Vritti Nirodha. You can't let loose your senses and send them to their grazing grounds and then go for restraint of Chitta. This is Vyaghata Dosha, this is contradiction. And therefore, Indriya Nigraha and Pratyahara have enormous importance in Chitta Vritti Nirodha scheme. Benumbing senses or anesthetizing senses or enfeebling senses is not Pratyahara. So this also has to be borne in mind. Anyway, to have better clarity about Pratyahara, let us go towards the definition of Pratyahara. So, Patanjali gives the definition: Svavishaya asamprayoge Chitta Swarupanukara iva Indriyanam Pratyaharaha. So the Indriyas must be drawn away from Svavishayas, their own objects. What are these their own objects? Eyes, Rupa Vishaya; ears, Shabda Vishaya; Grahana, Gandha Vishaya; Rasana, Rasa Vishaya; and Tvak, Sparsha Vishaya. So these are their objects. So what the senses usually do for us is that they are sensors of the 5 kinds of objects: Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. They are their Vishayas. So the Indriyas have to be drawn away from their own Vishayas. They should be made Vishaya Vinmukha, and the Indriyas have to be taken to their essential state, their Mool Swarupam. Their essential state is Chitta Swarupam. And when the senses are going after Chitta, that is Pratyahara. That is not going after objects but going after Chitta is Pratyahara. So, Patanjali here clearly says the Chitta is the material of senses. While some of the Indian philosophers have posited that senses are bhautika. To be specific here, the Nyaya Darshanam and Advaita Vedanta Darshanam of Shankaracharya, they consider senses as bhautika, while Patanjali has taken another stance here. He doesn't say Indriyas are bhautika, Indriya are chaitika. Their swarupa, chitta swarupanukara, iva Indriyana. So their swarupa is chitta swarupam, that is the material cause of the senses. So when the senses are going after the gravity of chitta, or the essential core condition of the chitta, and therefore weaned away from their objects, is pratyahara. So the chitta swarupam, what is this chitta swarupam? Because if the Indriyas are of chitta swarupam, we should know what is the chitta swarupam. The chitta swarupam is that it has no nama, rupa, jata, pata, varna, vangsha, linga, avastha, sthiti and akar. The chitta doesn't have name, form, color, doesn't have gender, doesn't have vangsha, ethnicity or genealogical background, and doesn't have shape, etc. So that is how the chitta is, essentially. Of course, later when it comes into the gravity of worldliness, it starts getting all these which are impositions. Because you will always feel that you have jat, pat, linga, varna, dharma, bhed, etc. So that is imposition. When you are fast asleep, in a deep sleep, dreamless sleep, you are not a man, you are not a woman, you are not young, you are not old, you are not unhealthy, you are not healthy, you are not weak, you are not strong, you are not stupid, you are not intelligent. But you are there. So that is how the chitta is. That's called mineral consciousness. The chitta at its mineral level doesn't have this, but when it comes to surface, then it starts getting those attributes, which is actually imposition of attributes. So when the chitta is outgoing, it will have caste, class, creed, gender, status, age, state, condition, etc. But when it is an antarmukhi, like in state of sleep, it doesn't have all those delimitations. You are not you, what you are in your awakeful state. You are there, but you are not you of awakeful state, because in awakeful state you have caste, class, creed, gender, race, ethnicity, age, condition, state, status, etc., etc. But when you are fast asleep, they are not there. Similarly, when the chitta is bahirmukha, it seems to be having all these dimensions, which are delimitations. But when the chitta has gone into its swarupam, it doesn't have it. And therefore, when the senses are in the chitta swarupa, they are not now senses of Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. So in deep subjectivism, there is Atma Bhimukhata. The word is Atma Bhimukhata in vernacular. Then Vishaya Bhimukhata. So Vishaya Bhimukhata is replaced by Atma Bhimukhata, and therefore it is nominal. The chitta also goes into gravity of nominal, Indriyas too go into gravity of nominal. So that is what the Pratyahara is. So it's a very interesting definition which comes in 2.54 Svavishaya asamprayoge. Asamprayogam, disjunction, disengagement. Disengagement from what? Svavishayas. Svavishayas. The Indriyas are their objects, and when they are disjuncted from their objects, and therefore they become Chitta Swarupa Anukara in deep subjectivism, that is called Pratyahara. So the senses are disengaged from where they are engaged in awakeful state. What are your senses doing in awakeful state? They are engaged with their objects. But then in yoga what happens? They are engaged somewhere which is a spiritual locus, and therefore disengaged from their objects. So that is how the Pratyahara is to be understood. Mere disjunction of the senses from their objects is not Pratyahara, because then a deep sleep would be Pratyahara. In deep sleep, senses are disengaged from their objects. Therefore, the sutra is precisely mentioning not just Svavishaya asamprayogaha pratyaharaha. Then even in the state of sleep, the senses are disengaged from their objects. So Patanjali therefore adds another aspect in definition, Svavishaya asamprayoge chitta swarupanukara. This chitta swarupanukara is important. Merely weaning the senses away from their objects is not pratyahara. Disengaging them from merely objects is not pratyahara. They must be engaged in chitta swarupanukara, something. So that is a metaphysical support. That is a transcendent support, which is deep inside our subjectivism. So the senses are engaged, and the senses therefore follow the chitta swarupam rather than vishaya rupam. So that is how we have to have primary understanding of the very definition. Now, how the senses are drawn away, this is guna vyapara, guna vyavastha. Sattva, Raja, Tama, three gunas are playing havoc everywhere, inside us and outside us. With pranayam, there is insulation to Rajatama gunas, or we are insulated to the currents of Rajatama gunas, and then we are disinsulated to only Sattva guna, and therefore the Indriyas can become sublime, because Sattva guna is for sublimity. So the pranayam does kind of treatment where Rajoguna and Tamoguna are mitigated and diminished to great extent, sufficiently enough for Sattva guna to stand out, glaringly occupy the chitta. So that is the magic of Yoga Samskruti, and pranayam does that. So pranayam does something which is a wonder for pratyahara. And when the pratyahara, with the onset of pratyahara, the onward journey in yoga would commence. So the technology of yoga says the pratyahara is not by just whiplashing the senses, suppressing the senses, thwarting the senses, stampeding the senses, or strangulating the sensory tendencies, but the sublimity which comes through pranayam. And then the pratyahara that happens is the pratyahara needed in yoga. So, therefore, Pratyahara comes Pranayamottara. However, Pranayam Purva also there is a Pratyahara. When Patanjali defines Tasmin Sati Shwasa Prachwasa Gati Vichedaha, Tasmin Sati thereafter. Whereafter? When the mind is free from dualities. When the mind is proof against dualities or the radiations of dualities, Dvandva Adabhighat condition. So there is also some Pratyahara which comes before Pranayam. But great aspect of Pratyahara comes after Pranayam. Greater proportion of Pratyahara comes after Pranayam. And therefore Pratyahara gets mentioned after Pranayam. So that's how we have entered into the definition of Pratyahara. So let us proceed to understand this Pratyahara further. But enough for the time being. We will proceed on this in our next session. So namaskar all of you.